Here is part 1 written in simple, natural, human-like English. Around 1,500 words, Lena stood just behind the curtain, her hands pressed tightly together as she tried to steady her breathing. The grand hall felt far larger than she had imagined. When she first accepted the invitation to perform, she had seen pictures of it online, pictures that made it look elegant and warm. But standing here in person, it felt overwhelming, almost intimidating. The high ceiling, the golden lights, the rows of well-dressed guests, it all added a pressure she had never felt in her life. She kept whispering to herself, just breathe, you can do this. But each time she repeated the words, her voice shook a little more. This event was unlike anything she had ever attended. She wasn't a star performer. She wasn't a music academy graduate or a rising social media pianist. She played piano quietly, gently, in small community gatherings and school events. Most people barely noticed her, and she had learned to accept that. She didn't chase fame, and she didn't imagine herself on any big stage. She just played because music made her feel something real, something safe. But tonight was different. Tonight she was standing among some of the most respected musicians, critics, and noble families in the region. And in front of them sat the one person everyone talked about, the royal judge, Lord Everett. People said he could break a musician's career with a single sentence. They said he was brutally honest, never polite, and completely impossible to impress. He had judged competitions for years, and his reviews often became the talk of the town. Artists feared him as much as they respected him. Lena tried not to think about him. She tried to keep her focus on the keys, the melody she had practiced thousands of times. But no matter how hard she tried, the thought of that sharp-eyed judge sitting there, waiting to hear her play, pierced right through her confidence. A stage assistant leaned toward her and whispered softly, "You're next. Get ready." Her stomach tightened. She closed her eyes for a moment, hoping to gather the little courage she still had. She told herself she didn't come here to impress anyone. She came here because she wanted to honor someone she had admired all her life. But even that thought couldn't stop her knees from feeling weak. The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "Next, we welcome a young pianist to the stage. Please give a warm welcome to Lena." The curtain lifted, and she stepped forward. Instantly, the hall lights seemed brighter than before, blinding almost. She tried to walk gracefully, but her steps felt unsure, as if the ground might shift beneath her at any moment. A soft murmur moved through the audience. She could hear people whispering, though she couldn't make out what they were saying. She spotted the judge's face in the front row. He didn't smile. He didn't even look curious. He looked tired and annoyed. When she reached the piano, she gave a small bow. Her voice wouldn't come out if she tried to speak, so she didn't attempt to. She just sat down at the bench, placing her fingers gently on the keys. Before she could even begin, Lord Everett let out a long sigh that echoed across the silent hall. Another timid performer. He muttered loud enough for everyone around him to hear, "We'll see if this one can at least keep the tempo." A few people around him chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or remain quiet. Lena felt her cheeks grow hot, and for a moment, she couldn't move. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had prepared herself for criticism, but not even a single note had left the piano yet. She hadn't even begun, and already she was judged. For a second, she wanted to run. She thought about standing up, apologizing, and leaving the stage before embarrassing herself any further. She imagined herself stepping off the stage and disappearing from the hall. That would be easy, no performance, no humiliation, no more of this suffocating pressure. But something inside her refused to let her move. A quiet, stubborn part of her reminded her why she came here. She didn't come to impress the judge. She came because she carried a melody in her heart, one that had shaped her childhood, one that had comforted her more times than she could count. She remembered the nights she spent sitting on the floor of her tiny room, listening to old recordings she found online, recordings of a pianist whose music she felt deeply connected to. Even though they had never met, the woman had played with emotion, with warmth, with something that felt like home. Her music was simple but sincere, soft but powerful. Lena closed her eyes, thinking of that voice, that warmth, and the sense of belonging she found in those melodies. That was what brought her here. Not fame, not applause, not approval. She took a slow breath, letting her fingers rest softly on the keys. But just as she was about to begin, Lord Everett leaned forward again and said, "I hope this one doesn't put us to sleep. We've had enough dull performances for one evening." His voice carried across the room, sharper than before. A wave of laughter spread through parts of the audience. though it was forced and uncomfortable. Some people shifted in their seats, sensing the cruelty behind his words. Others watched Lena closely, curious to see how she would respond. Her heart pounded. She felt as though every eye in the room was waiting for her to break, waiting for her to prove the judge right. She kept her eyes fixed on the piano, refusing to look up. If she met his gaze now, she knew she would lose whatever strength she had left. She whispered to herself, just one note. Start with one note. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the first key. But before the sound could fully flow, another thought hit her. What if she really was boring? What if she didn't deserve to be here? What if the judge's expectations were right? She froze again. The hall became painfully quiet. The silence felt heavier than any crowd noise. It filled her chest until she felt she couldn't breathe. She could feel her nerves climbing up her spine, making her shoulders stiff and her vision blurry. She heard someone in the back whisper, "Poor girl. She looks terrified." Another person added, "He shouldn't talk like that to her. She hasn't even played yet." But the whisper wasn't loud enough to reach the judge. Lena squeezed her eyes shut tightly. She remembered her childhood again, how she would hide behind her bedroom door, listening to the soft piano pieces that carried her through lonely days. She remembered how she would imagine a gentle voice saying, "Just play. Don't be afraid." She wished that voice was here now. The hall lights seemed warmer for a moment, and a soft memory came to her, one she had nearly forgotten. She remembered watching an interview with the pianist she admired. The woman had said, "Music is not about proving yourself. It's about sharing a feeling with someone who might need it." That memory soothed something inside Lena's heart. She took another breath. This time it felt steadier. The judge could mock her. The crowd could doubt her. But she had something they didn't know, something the judge himself didn't know. She had a melody that carried a piece of someone's soul, a melody that meant more to her than any trophy or praise ever could. So she placed her fingers on the keys again, and this time, she didn't hesitate. But just then, Lord Everett shifted in his seat and muttered, "Let's hope she actually begins this century." The audience let out another uncomfortable laugh, but Lena didn't flinch this time. She didn't react at all. Something inside her had changed. She no longer felt frozen. Instead, she felt a strange calmness settle in her chest. She reminded herself gently, "You're not here for him. You're here for the music." Her hands relaxed, her breathing softened, and for a brief moment, she felt as though the entire hall faded away. It didn't matter who was watching. It didn't matter who doubted her. All that mattered was the story she wanted to tell through her music. And with that quiet courage settling into her bones, she pressed the first note again, this time firmly. The soft sound echoed beautifully through the hall. It surprised her. It surprised everyone. But before the melody could unfold, the moment ended abruptly, the end of part one. Lena's first note still hung in the air when a memory from years ago rose gently in her mind, almost like a soft whisper from the past. It wasn't the kind of memory that came loudly. It came in a warm, calm way, reminding her why she was sitting here on this grand stage in the first place. Long before she ever heard of this event, long before she ever knew people like the royal judge even existed, she had grown up in a tiny apartment where music was her only escape from long, quiet days. Back then, she didn't have a real piano. She had a worn-out keyboard someone from the neighborhood had given her. It wasn't perfect. Some keys stuck, others made a tiny crackling sound, but to her, it was enough. She would sit on the floor with her legs crossed and play the same melodies over and over again. But the melody that changed her life didn't come from her own hands. It came from an old audio clip she found late one night on a small website that posted rare recordings. The clip had no fancy title, no shining picture, no description. It was simply labeled, untitled, "Piano Piece." She clicked play out of curiosity, not expecting much. The moment the first soft notes played, something inside her heart shifted. It was gentle, it was warm. It felt like someone was speaking without words, speaking directly to the part of her that felt small, unnoticed, invisible. The melody carried sadness and hope at the same time, almost as if the person playing it understood what it meant to feel lonely, but still believed in something beautiful. From that night on, Lena listened to that piece every evening. It was like a friend who sat with her when the world felt too heavy. She didn't know who the pianist was at first. The website didn't say, but she searched and searched, and finally she found the name. Lady Eleanor, a woman who had been admired by many years ago, a woman known not for fame, but for the emotion she poured into her music. People said her playing felt like a warm conversation, They said she never played to impress, she played to connect. Lena didn't know all the details of her life, but she read whatever she could find. She learned that Lady Eleanor had passed away early, leaving behind a handful of recordings and a legacy of sincerity. It didn't matter to Lena that the world had moved on, or that only a few people still remembered her music. To Lena, she wasn't just a pianist. She was the person who unknowingly helped her through some of her hardest days. And now, years later, Lena had chosen one of Lady Eleanor's forgotten melodies to play tonight. She had practiced it carefully, but she didn't copy it exactly. She added her own small touches, tiny changes she hoped would honor the original, while also expressing her own heart. She didn't expect anything from it. She didn't hope for applause or praise. She only hoped that someone in this huge room might feel even a small part of what she once felt. As she sat on the stage now, remembering those late nights in her tiny room, the fear in her chest softened. She remembered how safe she felt in those melodies. And for a moment, she forgot the judge's harsh comments. She forgot the laughter. She forgot the pressure. She remembered the music. The hall was still silent, waiting for her to continue. She could sense curiosity now, some people leaning forward, others sitting up straighter. They expected her to break or stumble after everything the judge had said. They expected her to fade. She wasn't going to. Her fingers rested on the keys again. She took a breath, letting her chest rise slowly, and finally allowed herself to sink into the same calmness she once felt as a child. But before she played the next note, she felt a strange pull, or maybe a thought. She realized that the judge, Lord Everett, had no idea she was about to play something deeply connected to him. He didn't know that the melody she chose was one his mother had composed. He didn't know that the piece she treasured for years was actually a part of his life, too. He didn't know that his harshest criticisms tonight were moments away from colliding with a memory he thought he had buried long ago. Lena didn't know he was Lady Eleanor's son not until 2 weeks ago, when she first saw his name listed as the head judge. Her heart had stopped for a moment when she read it. Everett, the same last name she had seen under old articles and interviews about the pianist she admired. At first she wasn't sure if it was the same family, but after digging through old posts, photos, and news clips, she learned the truth. Lady Eleanor was his mother. For days she didn't know whether she should change her performance. She wondered if playing this melody would offend him. She wondered if he would think she was trying to use his mother's name for attention. She even considered withdrawing from the event. But then she remembered how deeply Lady Eleanor's music had comforted her. She remembered the kindness she had felt through those recordings. And she realized something important. She wasn't doing this for fame, or for the judge, or for the audience. She was doing this because she wanted to share something meaningful, something that once helped her breathe on days when the world felt too heavy. So she decided to keep the peace. Now, sitting under the bright stage lights, she wondered silently what the judge would think. Would he recognize it? Would he care? Would he listen long enough to understand the emotion behind it? Her fingers moved gently, pressing the next sequence of notes. The sound floated softly through the hall. People listened, even the judge, despite his earlier impatience, leaned back in his seat slightly, recognizing the structure of the melody. His eyebrows lifted just a little, as if something in the music tugged at a distant corner of his memory. Lena didn't look up. She never looked up when she played something important. Her world shrank to the piano, to the smooth keys beneath her hands, to the delicate rise and fall of the melody. Every note felt like a small truth she was sharing. Every pause carried something she had never said out loud. She wasn't trying to be perfect. She just wanted the music to feel honest. The hall stayed completely still. No one whispered. No one shifted. It felt as if the entire room was breathing with her. The judge's expression changed slowly. At first he seemed confused, then tense, then strangely emotional, as if the music was tapping a memory he didn't expect to remember tonight. Lena didn't notice him, but she felt something changing in the air. Something warm replacing the coldness she felt earlier. She remembered another memory, one from just after she discovered Lady Eleanor's music. She had watched an old video interview of her. The interviewer asked, "Why do you play? What do you hope people feel when they listen to your music?" Lady Eleanor had smiled gently and answered, "I hope they feel seen. I hope they feel less alone. If a single person listens and finds comfort, that's enough for me." Those words stayed with Lena for years. Now, as she played, she hoped the melody would do the same. The notes grew a little fuller, a little braver. Her hands moved more confidently across the keys. She felt the story behind the music, Lady Eleanor's story. her own story flowing into the room like warm light. For a moment, she felt something impossible to describe. It was as if she wasn't playing alone, as if the music itself was guiding her. The audience continued to watch closely, drawn in by something they couldn't quite name. Lord Everett sat very still, his expression softening in a way no one had seen all evening. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, followed by something else, something more vulnerable. As Lena reached the gentle pause before the piece's middle section, she let the last note fade naturally. The silence that followed wasn't cold or heavy, it was warm, thoughtful, almost glowing. She didn't know it yet, but that moment was the start of something none of them would forget. And that brought part two to an end. The hall stayed completely silent as Lena moved into the next part of the melody. The soft notes floated out gently at first, almost like a whisper that carried a secret. With each passing moment, something in the room changed. It was subtle, but it was real. People were no longer just watching her. They were feeling something. Lena didn't know what was happening around her. She didn't see the way people straightened in their seats. She didn't see the small gasps or the wide eyes. She didn't notice how the room that once held coldness and doubt now felt warmer, calmer. All she knew was the music. Her fingers moved slowly, then a little faster, following the gentle rise and fall Lady Eleanor had created long ago. She didn't think about the judge anymore. She didn't think about the crowd or the pressure or the harsh words thrown at her earlier. Right now, the only thing she felt was the melody, soft, emotional, full of tiny breaths between notes. But down in the front row, the man who once doubted her sat frozen. Lord Everett had come to this event expecting the same thing he had seen for years: performers trying too hard to impress, musicians focusing more on speed and loudness than emotion. He had grown tired of it. He had grown cold, numb even, after years of judging without feeling anything. But when Lena played the first full sequence of Lady Eleanor's melody, something inside him cracked open. He knew this music. He knew it so well that his chest tightened the moment the familiar pattern reached his ears. It wasn't a public piece. It wasn't a famous composition anybody could easily find. It was something private, something personal. It belonged to his mother. He remembered hearing her play it late at night when she thought he was asleep. He remembered sitting quietly in the hallway as a child, hugging his knees, listening to the same notes Lena was playing now. He remembered the softness in his mother's hands, the calmness in her breathing, the warmth she carried whenever she touched the piano. He remembered everything. For years, he had avoided thinking about her. Her passing had left a space in him he never learned how to fill. Instead of healing, he buried himself in work, in strictness, in building a reputation that protected him from emotion. But tonight, in this hall full of strangers, a shy pianist had brought his mother's music back to life. His throat tightened. He blinked rapidly, trying to push away the emotion rising in him. He wasn't used to feeling this way, not in public, not in front of so many people. But the melody didn't stop for him. It kept going, gentle and steady, pulling memory after memory out of the quiet corners of his heart. Lena still didn't look up. She didn't know what she was doing to him. She only knew that the music felt right, felt honest, felt like something she had to play with her whole heart. Her hands moved to the middle part of the piece, Lady Eleanor's most emotional section. It was where the melody dipped slightly, becoming softer, deeper, as if expressing something unspoken. The audience felt the shift. A woman in the middle row pressed a hand to her chest. A young boy leaned forward, eyes wide, almost holding his breath. An older gentleman closed his eyes, letting the sound carry him somewhere peaceful. No one expected this kind of emotion from the shy girl who had walked onto the stage trembling. Even the stage crew backstage watched from the shadows, surprised by the strange stillness in the room. Lena felt the emotional weight of the piece, too. She remembered all the nights she listened to this exact moment of the melody, when she needed comfort the most. She remembered how the music told her, without any words, "You're not alone." She hoped quietly, silently, that maybe someone in this hall needed to hear the same thing tonight. As she reached the softest part of the melody, her fingers slowed. Each note landed like a drop of warm rain, delicate and full of meaning. She played it with care, with love, with respect. Then something unexpected happened. A tiny sound broke the silence, not from the piano, from the judge. Lord Everett inhaled sharply, almost like he had been holding his breath for too long, and finally let it break. His eyes grew glossy. He looked away quickly, trying to hide it, but the people nearest to him noticed. Whispers didn't start. No one dared to ruin the moment, but people exchanged glances, surprised by the sudden softness in the man who had mocked the pianist earlier. Lena still didn't look at him. She was too deep inside the music to see anything else. The melody slowly grew stronger now, rising with emotion as if telling the story of someone who had loved deeply, lost deeply, and still held on to light. Lena felt her own eyes sting a little, but she held steady. Her hands moved with familiarity, tracing each note like a memory she had lived through. She didn't play loudly or boldly. She played gently, almost like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. The audience couldn't take their eyes off her. It wasn't because she looked confident. She didn't. It wasn't because she looked powerful. She didn't. It was because she looked honest. Every movement of her hands, every small breath, every slight tremble in her shoulders felt real. It felt human. It felt like something true. As she moved into the final part of the middle section, she let the notes linger just a little longer. She didn't rush. She didn't force anything. She let the melody guide her. Lord Everett watched her, unable to look away. His heart raced in a way he didn't understand. He hadn't felt this kind of emotion since he was a boy, since the days he sat in a hallway, listening to his mother play this same melody. He didn't know how this young pianist found the piece. He didn't know why she chose it. He didn't know that the music had saved her during moments of loneliness. All he knew was that her playing felt sincere. So sincere it stirred something he had kept buried for years. His fingers curled slightly around the edge of his chair. His jaw tightened as another wave of memory hit him. His mother humming this melody softly, as she braided his hair when he was little, her voice warm and full of love. He swallowed hard. Up on the stage, Lena reached a gentle pause in the melody. It was a natural stopping point, a soft breath in the music, where the world seemed to stand still. She lifted her hands slightly above the keys. The hall held its breath with her. Then she continued. The melody shifted into a hopeful tone now. It wasn't loud, but it was brighter. The notes lifted gently, carrying a feeling of quiet strength. Some people in the audience felt tears in their eyes without understanding why. It was the kind of melody that didn't need explanation. It spoke to a part of the heart that words couldn't reach. Lena felt something rise in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt earlier. She wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't shrinking under the weight of the judge's earlier mockery. She felt present. She felt alive. This was why she played. Not for perfection, not for praise, not for approval, but for connection. She let the notes dance softly, guiding the room into a gentle calm. Each sound felt like a hand reaching out, offering comfort. The judge wiped his eye quickly, hoping no one saw. But people did. The change in him was undeniable. He didn't look strict anymore. He didn't look sharp or cold. He looked human. As Lena approached the ending of the middle section, the last note rang beautifully in the air. It was warm, soft, and full of meaning. Then silence, a comforting silence. The kind of silence that comes only when a room is completely connected to a story. Lena let her hands rest on her lap for a brief moment, taking one soft breath. She wasn't finished yet. The melody still had more to say, and that brought part 3 to an emotional close. The hall felt different now, softer, warmer, almost as if the music itself had changed the air. Lena didn't sense the crowd's reaction directly. She was too focused on the keys, too deep inside the world of the melody. But she felt something around her, something she couldn't explain. It felt like calmness, like acceptance, like she was no longer standing alone on the stage, but surrounded by quiet understanding. She lifted her fingers once again and moved into the next part of the piece, the part that carried a faint glow of hope. It wasn't loud or proud. It was gentle, steady, like the feeling of sunlight after a long night. Her hands glided across the keys, and the notes rose softly, weaving into the air like threads of light. The hall listened quietly, almost melting into the music. Lord Everett leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on her hands. The sharpness in his expression was long gone. Now he watched her with something uncertain, almost fragile, as if he wasn't sure how to handle the emotions rising inside him. He recognized every part of the melody now, the little pauses, the tiny shifts, the warmth hidden in each note. He remembered sitting at his mother's side when he was very small, watching her play the same part of the piece, her fingers moving slowly as she hummed under her breath. It had been years since he let himself think of those memories. For so long, he had buried them because remembering her hurt too much. He had become strict, distant, harsh, not because he wanted to be, but because closing himself off felt easier than feeling pain. But Lena's playing didn't attack his heart. It reached for it gently. It reminded him of the soft things he had forgotten. It reminded him of her. The melody softened again, moving into a slow, steady rhythm that almost felt like a heartbeat. Lena played it with a kind of tenderness that wasn't forced. It wasn't for show. It felt natural, like she understood the emotion behind it. She didn't know the story of the piece. She didn't know why Lady Eleanor wrote it. She didn't know the memories it carried for the judge sitting only a few feet away. But somehow, she played it as if she did. The audience remained silent, completely drawn into the world she was creating with her hands. No one moved. No one whispered. It felt like the kind of moment that people wished they could hold on to forever. Lena took another soft breath as she reached the part of the melody she always found the hardest, not because it was technically challenging, but because it held so much emotion. This was the part where the melody dipped gently, like a quiet sigh. It sounded almost like someone letting go, or someone remembering. When she played this moment alone in her room, she always felt a tiny ache in her chest. Not sadness, exactly something else. Something deeper. She pressed the keys carefully, letting each note breathe. Lord Everett felt his throat tighten again. He remembered the night his mother showed him this part of the piece. He remembered sitting beside her as she played it slowly, her eyes soft and full of warmth. He hadn't understood much at the time, he was too young. But now, hearing it again after all these years, he finally recognized the emotion behind the notes. It was love, a quiet, endless kind of love. The kind a parent gives without asking for anything in return. He felt something inside him tremble. Not break, just tremble, as if a part of him was waking up from a long sleep. The people sitting near him noticed the shift in his posture. He wasn't the same stern judge anymore. He looked almost human, vulnerable, like a man remembering something he didn't know he missed. Lena still didn't look at him. Her own eyes were lowered, focused on the movement of her fingers. She played carefully, with steady breaths, letting the music flow naturally. When she reached the next section, the gentle climb toward the closing part, she let the notes rise slowly, like a small flame gaining warmth. The melody began to brighten, carrying the feeling of quiet hope. People in the hall felt it too. A sense of calm swept through the rows. Some closed their eyes. Some leaned back in their seats. Some clasped their hands together, as if holding onto something precious. Even those who didn't understand music could tell that something special was happening. It wasn't just skill. It wasn't just talent. It was sincerity. Lena's playing felt honest, almost like she was speaking through the piano. She didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't push the music too hard. She let it unfold naturally, like a soft conversation. As she moved into the second to last part of the piece, the notes became warmer, fuller. This section was meant to lift the heart, to give the listener a sense of comfort. Lena played it with a gentle strength. Her earlier fear was gone. Her shoulders were relaxed. Her hands were steady. She looked calm, not confident in a proud way, but in a peaceful way. A few people exchanged small smiles, touched by the quiet beauty of the moment. Lord Everett let out a slow breath he didn't realize he was holding. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about judging or critiquing or analyzing. He wasn't thinking about what the performer should have done or shouldn't have done. He was simply listening and remembering. He lifted a hand to his face and rubbed the corner of his eye. He hoped no one noticed. But even if they did, he didn't care as much anymore, because in that moment, he understood something he had forgotten long ago. His mother didn't play to impress. She played to connect. And now, this young pianist was bringing that same feeling back. Lena reached the penultimate phrase, letting the notes fall gently into the quiet space around her. She held one soft note a heartbeat longer than usual, just enough to let its warmth settle. Then she moved into the final section. The closing part of Lady Eleanor's piece wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud or flashy. It didn't try to grab attention. Instead, it felt like a warm goodbye, a gentle ending that left the heart full. Lena played the beginning of the final section slowly. She let each note land softly, like footsteps walking toward a peaceful horizon. Her breathing steadied. Her hands moved smoothly, gracefully. The crowd felt the ending approaching and leaned in unconsciously, not wanting to miss a single sound. Lord Everett's eyes softened completely. He wasn't fighting his emotions anymore. He let the melody wash over him. He remembered his mother's smile, her soft laugh, her gentle hands as she fixed his hair, her voice saying, "Music is a gift, my dear. It keeps us together even when we're far apart." He hadn't understood those words then, but tonight, he did. Lena reached the final few measures of the melody. These last notes were the ones she loved most. She had practiced them countless times late at night, letting their warmth stay with her long after the sound faded. She pressed each key with care, allowing the music to settle into the hearts of everyone listening. The final chord rang out softly, pure, warm, filled with emotion, and then the hall fell silent, a deep, peaceful silence. Lena slowly lifted her hands from the piano, letting the last echo fade naturally. She didn't move. She didn't look up. She simply sat there for a moment, letting the quiet surround her. The hall remained still. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from confusion or discomfort. It was the kind that came only after something meaningful, something real. Lena finally took a slow breath and lifted her head. She didn't expect applause. She didn't expect cheers or praise. She had played from her heart, and that was enough. The hall stayed silent for a long moment after the last note faded. It was the kind of silence that did not feel empty. It felt full, like everyone in the room was still holding on to the feeling the music had brought. The shy pianist kept her hands on the keys for a few seconds, almost afraid to move. She wondered if she had done something wrong or if the audience simply did not know how to react. Her heart beat so loudly in her chest that she felt it might echo across the hall. But then, slowly, a soft sound broke the stillness. Someone clapped, then another, and another. In just a few seconds, the whole room rose to their feet. The applause grew louder and louder until it felt like the hall itself was shaking. People were cheering, some with tears still on their faces. It was as if the entire audience had been waiting for this moment to breathe again. She looked up, confused and overwhelmed, not knowing where to focus. She saw strangers smiling at her, clapping like they had witnessed something rare. She had never seen people react this way to her playing. In her small town, applause was soft and gentle, the kind meant to encourage, not celebrate. But this was different. This felt real. This felt like the world had finally heard her. But the most unexpected sight of all was the judge. He stood in the front row, not sitting behind the long table where he had sat earlier. He had walked closer without her even noticing. His eyes were still wet, but he was not hiding it. His usual stern expression was gone. Instead, he looked almost humbled, as if her music had taken something heavy off his shoulders. The applause kept going, but he lifted a hand slightly, and the hall slowly quieted. Not fully, but enough for him to speak. He took a step forward, then another, his footsteps soft against the wood floor. The pianist felt herself freeze, unsure of what he would say. She remembered how harsh he had been earlier. She remembered the words that had made her want to walk away before she even played. She wondered if he would act differently now in front of the crowd, or if he would keep the same cold tone. But when he finally spoke, his voice sounded nothing like the voice that had mocked her. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, almost gently. The audience held their breath. He continued, "I judged you before you even touched the piano. I thought you came here with nothing to offer. I was wrong." He paused as if searching for words that would not come easily. "What you played, it was more than music. It was a memory I thought I had lost forever. And you brought it back with such care that it felt like she was here again." The pianist lowered her gaze, feeling her throat tighten. She had hoped her performance would touch him, but she had never imagined it would move him so deeply. He took another step closer until he stood just a few feet away from her. "My mother used to play that melody when I was very young," he said. "She never performed it publicly, only at home, only for us. I have not heard it in many years. I never expected to hear it again in this lifetime. Yet tonight, you gave it back to me." The hall grew even quieter, as if everyone understood that this moment belonged to more than just a competition. He then bowed his head, not a deep, dramatic bow, but a small, sincere one, a gesture of respect. She felt her breath catch. She had never seen someone of his status bow to anyone. The audience, sensing the meaning behind the gesture, erupted into applause once again, louder than before. The kind of applause that did not feel like it was only for the pianist. It was also for what had just happened between them, something honest, something rare. The judge straightened himself and looked at her again. "If you are willing," he said softly, "I would like to invite you to perform at a special event we hold every year in her memory. It would mean a great deal to me, and, I believe, to her as well." The pianist felt her eyes sting. She nodded, unable to speak. The words would not come. It felt unreal that someone who had once dismissed her would now ask her to honor his mother's memory. As the applause continued, a few people in the audience came forward to greet her. Some reached out to shake her hand. Others simply wanted to tell her how much the performance had touched them. She listened politely, feeling shy but grateful. She had never seen so many people gather around her. A woman with gentle eyes said, "Your music made me remember my own mother." "Thank you," a man added, I didn't know a piano could say so much without words. Another person whispered, "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Each comment warmed her heart in a different way. She had always hoped that music could reach people, but seeing it happen right in front of her felt unreal. Meanwhile, the judge stood quietly nearby, giving her space but still watching with a look that showed deep respect. He no longer looked like the strict, unmovable figure he was known for. Tonight, he looked human, someone who had been reminded of something precious. When the crowd finally began to leave, she found herself alone for a moment on the stage. She looked at the piano, gently touching the keys again. She had sat at many pianos in her life, but this one would stay in her memory forever. Not because it was grand or expensive, but because of what had happened around it. She sighed softly, still overwhelmed. She had come here expecting nothing more than a chance to share her music. She had prepared herself for rejection, even criticism. She had never expected to change someone's heart. The judge approached her one more time. His voice was calm and sincere when he said, "You showed me something I had forgotten. Music is not about perfection. It is about honesty. And yours was honest in a way that reached deeper than technique ever could." She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she finally managed to say. He gave a small smile. "Keep playing. The world needs this kind of sound." She watched him leave, still processing his words. They felt like a promise, like a doorway to something she had never imagined for herself. As she stepped out of the hall later that night, the cool air greeted her softly. The city lights shimmered in the distance. She walked quietly, hugging her small bag close to her chest. She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel unnoticed. Tonight, her music had been seen, heard, felt, and even though she had played for many people, she knew the most important part of the night was not the applause or the compliments. It was the moment the judge had looked at her not with power or pride, but with gratitude. She had touched something inside him that even he had forgotten existed. As she walked down the steps of the hall, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is just the beginning." The street was quiet, but inside her, everything felt alive. Her hands, which had once trembled before touching the keys, now felt steady. Her heart felt full, and her dream, which had always seemed too far away, suddenly felt close enough to reach. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know where this new path would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. Tonight proved that even the quietest person can move a room, and even the coldest heart can be warmed by a single honest melody.